pumpkin spice latte. Back to school shopping. You guys will like this one. Sweater weather. Yeah. Mums and pumpkin decorations. Apple picking. And, this might stress some people out. I love you guys. Just 15 weeks until Christmas. Today, of course, is June 23rd. But soon, in just 77 short days, it'll be September 8th, which I realize is not actually the start of fall. I actually don't know when the real start of fall is. But for most of us, especially if you're kind of, depending on your work world, definitely if you have kids, school world, once it hits after Labor Day, that Sunday when we will all be together on September 8th, it's going to feel like fall with all of that stuff included. And that's coming. By God's grace, those of us that are in this room right now, those of us who are watching online, hopefully many of us will also be together on September 8th. That's really not the question. The question is who will we be on September 8th? Will we be the same as we are now? Will we be worse? Or could we be better? We recently had something that we released out to the church family. Some of you have got a chance to fill this out, which has been incredibly helpful. It's called the Energy Audit. If you have never seen it before, or if you've got a chance to fill yours out, it'd be a huge help to us. But one of the things we're trying to do is just trying to figure out as leaders, how are we doing? Because we want to make sure, we always want to be challenging each other to always make steps forward, but we also, it can sometimes feel oppressive. It can feel I can't give anymore and on the verge of burnout. And so how can we not be under challenged, but how can we not be burnout? And trying to find, it's always difficult, that happy middle, and this energy audit is one way to do that. But one of those questions that we're asking in the energy audit is we're asking you to kind of move these little sliders about how you are really doing in your life. And there's these four categories of, are you thriving? Are you just kind of surviving? Are you struggling? Or are you in crisis? And we ask this about different parts of your life. So we talk about pace of life. So how are you doing in the pace in which you are living your life right now? Do you feel like you're thriving? Do you just have extra time and you just feel like you are present in every situation that you are, and you have enough time where you're getting enough sleep and doing the things that you want to do? Or do you just feel like you're just running and running and running and you don't have enough time to even do the things that you know you should do, to do the healthy things in life? How are you doing with your pace of life? Relationally, are you connected? Do you have deep people in your life that you can make time for on a regular basis? Or do you feel isolated? Do you feel disconnected? Do you feel alone? Do you feel like that the relationships in your life, that there's lots of strain in them? How are you doing? Intellectually, how are you doing? Are you learning new things? Are you challenging yourself? Especially as we think about looking at the Bible and about God, are you allowing yourself to be curious about new and interesting things? Or do you feel stagnant and just kind of mentally, how are you doing? Are you feeling just peace? Are you feeling just from the inside out that I kind of am the way that I want to be right now? Or just mentally, are you just a mess? And the one you can't see on there is financially. How are you doing financially? And here's what we want you to know. Wherever you would personally move those sliders, and if we could go around the room and take the time, all of us would be at different levels of every single one of those. Wherever you are today, walking into this room is fine. Maybe it's not fine because you're really struggling, and we don't want you to think that. But that you're here and you're where you're at. We are a group of human, real people, and some of us are not where we want to be most of us probably are not totally where we want to be. And wherever you are, we want you to know you are welcome, you are accepted, and that if I was to fill those out, there's things that I need to move into. That's not the question. The question is June 8th is coming. And we have 77 days. And how could we leverage those next 77 days to move maybe a little bit more towards flourishing? Or if we are flourishing in some of those areas, thriving in some of those areas, how can we move a little bit more? How can we use these next 77 days to take some steps forward? And here's my goal. Here's my agenda for this half an hour or so that we're speaking, and then here's my agenda as we're going through the whole summer, is I want myself and I want every single one of you to be thriving. I want every one of you to be flourishing. We're going to talk about it today. I want every single one of you to be able to look at these things in your life and be like, the pace of my life is bearing fruit, good fruit. What I'm learning intellectually, the relationships in my life, financially, it is bearing fruit. It is moving forward. And I believe that for every single one of us, that is possible. Because 2,000 years ago, Jesus came on the scene, and one of the things that Jesus said is that the reason why he came is he wanted us to have life. And not just like life, not just like surviving life, definitely not in crisis life, but he wanted us to have life to the full. And the giant asterisk next to that is that what we're pursuing this summer, as we're talking about thriving and flourishing and life to the full, is we want Jesus's life to the full, which is very different than American life to the full, is very different than possibly Democrat or Republican life to the full, might be different than how you would define life to the full. Because the guy who said this lived his whole life poor, lived his whole life unhoused, ended up getting nailed to a cross, and he throughout it said he was living life to the full. If you've been with us, we've been looking at a letter written by a guy named Paul. And Paul was writing this letter from prison, living in a pit where he had to rely on other friends. And he would say that he was experiencing life to the full. And so whatever kind of the circumstances of life right now, we believe that this is possible for us to experience what Jesus was describing when he talked about life to the full. And here's the plan. Here's the big plan from Jesus of how we can all do this. This comes from John 15. Here's what he said. Oh, sorry. I forgot this cool quote that I don't want to miss. So we've been in your program. We gave you lots of pieces of paper today, so you have stuff to make a fan with, and then also to read, hopefully. We've been promoting a book for a while now called In the Way by John Mark Comer, and he talks a lot about what we're going to talk about this whole summer, this idea of just spending time with God. I encourage you, if you haven't read that book yet, to read that book. Some of you already read it. Really, really great. But we've said this quote a few times now, but I really love it. Because if we want to live life to the full, we're going to talk about the plan. That's the key. We need a plan, and that's it. We need a plan. Because if we're thinking that, okay, somehow I want to be more thriving when September 8th comes along, just wishing it, hoping it is not going to happen. And I just love the way John Mark says this. Here's the thing. As great as all this sounds, living life to the full, flourishing, it isn't going to just magically happen. Christ-likeness is possible, but it's not natural. Nobody wakes up one morning around age 50 and thinks, wow, would you look at that? I became a saint. That's weird. Or, it seems I've been living the Sermon on the Mount. I'm increasingly free of all worry and care and judgmentalism and lust and anger. Money no longer has a hold on my heart. I'm no longer run by fear and the need to look good to other people. I'm free. I've been pervaded by love and even love for my enemies. What a nice coincidence. Yeah, no. If we want to move in this direction, it's going to take intentionality. It's going to take a plan. And so here's Jesus' big plan of how we can move forward. And now this is from John 15. It says, remain in me, as I also remain in you. No branch can bear fruit by itself. It must remain in the vine. Neither can you bear fruit unless you remain in me. We're going to read more, but that's the plan, okay? All right, you guys are a smart group. We need to stay a little interactive because it's hot and sweaty in here today. So pop quiz, okay? That's Jesus' plan of how we're going to grow. And so what, according to Jesus, what is the goal? Bear fruit. His goal is that he wants us to bear fruit in our lives, to be living in such a way that we are bearing fruit. What is his big plan then of how we can be people that are bearing fruit? Remain. Very good. We want to remain in him. I am not much of a gardener, but I did bring some extra plants from my house today. So here's his basic idea. So these are some daisies that normally sit in the front of our house, and they're pretty cool. And then here's some roses that I cut from our rose bush this morning. These have now been cut off from the vine. What do you think is going to happen with this within the next day or two, even if I put it in water, and even if I added some fertilizer to it, and even if I was doing all the necessary steps? What's going to happen to this? It's going to wilt, it's going to die. Now, this way, I was going to my original plan, and then I didn't consult my wife, so I didn't. But what Ashley would normally do is we have flowers kind of all around outside, and she will typically go outside, and she will cut flowers off, and I put them in our house, which is great, and they look really nice, and then they all end up dying. But any of these flowers that stay connected, this will kind of keep, at least this is what the florist told me, Sandy or Mary, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, that this will continue to keep producing daisies all summer long as if I cut this off at the bottom here, and we might have a problem. If I dug this out by the roots, then we might have a problem. But as long as this remains, this will keep on producing fruit all summer long. So that's Jesus' big plan. Jesus is going to talk more about it. For you to grow this summer and beyond this summer, into the fall, for the rest of your life. If you want to be a person who is bearing fruit in your life, Jesus' big plan is to spend time around him, remain in him, be around him, listen to him, focus on him. The more time you spend around Jesus, the more you will be bearing fruit in your life. And Jesus expands on this. He says, I am the vine, and you are the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. But apart from me, you can do nothing. A little bit more severe here. He says, if you do not remain in me, you are like a branch that is thrown away and withers, which is eventually what will happen to this flower and all the other wonderful flowers that we cut and then put in our house, and they look nice for a while. They end up getting thrown out, picked up, and thrown into the fire and burned. And there's a lot that we can talk about with that. But you're going to spend your summer doing something. You are going to be intentional about taking care of some things this summer. You are going to have completed some tasks. You are going to have some habits this summer, regardless of it. It will just happen naturally. And the question is when you get to the end, will it be things that keep producing fruit, or will they be things that end up just kind of getting thrown away? Well, I spent a lot of time that summer worrying about. I spent a lot of time that summer focusing on. I thought this was a big deal. And 5 years from now, will it still matter? Will it be important? Or as you look at the relationships in your life, as you look at the soul of your life, will you choose to focus on things that will actually remain past just when they, this summer? He goes on, if you remain in me and my words, remain in me and ask whatever you wish, and it will be done for you. In a couple weeks, we're going to have a prayer walk Sunday. Talk about when you remain in God, the level of prayer that we get to do is just super fun. Your Father's glory, that you bear much fruit. That's his goal, showing yourselves to be my disciples. This should be the obvious thing for folks who are following Jesus, that they are bearing fruit. As the Father has loved me, so have I loved you. Now remain in me. At this point, you might have a little bit of a question. Okay, so we're going to remain in Jesus. What does that look like? Or how? How does one go about remaining in Jesus? And Jesus describes it. He says, this is how. If you keep my commands, you will remain in my love. How do you remain in God? How do you remain attached to the vine? You keep his commands. Just as I, watch me as the model, Jesus would say, just as I have kept my Father's commands and remained in his love, I have told you this so that my joy may be in you and that your joy may be complete. There's always different words of like what flourishing and thriving looks like. And joy could be one of my favorites. One of the marks of when you are bearing fruit in your life and you are flourishing is you actually have joy. Not always perfect circumstances, not always like happiness like we think of, but this kind of deep-seated like contentment and joy that these biblical authors talk about regardless of the circumstances. And so we ask the question, so if we're supposed to, if the way in which we remain is by following his commands, then what is his commands? And Jesus does something kind of interesting here. He says, I want you to follow my commands, plural, and then he narrows it down. He says, my command, now singular, is this. And this is something that the rest of the biblical authors in the New Testament, as they're trying to describe what this Jesus movement is about, especially Paul was like all about this idea, that all the commands actually can be boiled down to one. And this is partly where they get that idea, is Jesus saying, if you want to remain in me, I want you to keep my commands. Okay, that's a lot of commands. I mean, this is like a pretty hefty book. Like we're supposed to like follow all this stuff. And Jesus narrows it down to, if you want to remain in me, it's actually can be narrowed down, all summed up, the way Paul says it, in one command. My command is this. My command is this, love each other as I have loved you. Greater love has no one than this, than to lay down one's life for one's friends. You are my friends if you do what I command. If you want to remain in me, I want you to love. And I don't want you to just love how you see everyone else loving. I don't want you to love how maybe you experienced love, good or bad, growing up. I want you to get your cue of how you love other people by watching me. And by the way, this little exchange that Jesus is having, he's giving to his disciples, these now it's 11 guys, one of them named Judas had already left, and they're sitting around having dinner with each other in what we now call the Last Supper. Because literally hours after Jesus says these words, he's going to be arrested, he's going to be unfairly tried, and then he's going to be killed on a cross. And these words, as John reflects on them and writes them down years later, as he's describing what love is, for him to say these words, I don't know how much they meant in that moment as they were eating dinner, but as these moments unfolded over the next couple hours through the arrest and the crucifixion of Jesus, here's how I want you to love. Greater love has no one than this, than to lay down one's life for one's friends. You are my friends if you do what I command. Watch me to find out how you love. And that is not only how I love you, but that's how I want you to love other people. I no longer call you servants, because a servant does not know his master's business. Instead, I have called you friends. For everything that I learned from my Father, I have made known to you. We look at Jesus so we can know what God is like. You did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you so that you might go and bear fruit, fruit that will last, so that whatever you ask in my name, the Father will give me. And then he reiterates again. And by the way, in case you forgot, this is my command, love each other. So that's Jesus' kind of whole summation here. Here's what I want you to do. As I'm getting ready to leave, I'm getting ready, you guys are going to start this new thing of this Jesus movement of the church. If you want to grow, if you want to bear fruit, I want you to remain in me, and I want you to love each other. And so that's Jesus' plan. Good enough for me. That's our plan. That's my goal of if you want to take steps forward this summer, and that'll look different based off of all of our life experiences and where we currently are. But if you want to take some sort of a step forward, my big plan for you is I want you to find ways to remain in God and to find ways to intentionally love other people. And according to Jesus, if you make a regular practice of remaining in with Jesus, and if you make a regular practice of loving other people, then when we get to September 8th, you will be closer, if not there, to a life of thriving, flourishing, fruit-bearing. It's possible. And we all have the possibility to take the next seven days to move forward. So here's what that looks like in practicality. So that's the plan. And now everything else we're going to go over, like I said, I put a lot of paper on your chairs today. We have a whole summer sheet that kind of outlines a bunch of stuff, and then there's something that specifically talks about community groups that I'm going to talk about. But let me be clear as I go through all of these. These are all tools. These are all helps. None of these are the goal. The goal is not for you to come to a service. The goal is not for you to do a Sabbath day. The goal is not for you to have a daily office. The goal is for you to flourish. And these tools will help us to remain in Jesus. These tools will help us to be able to love the other people around us. And that's the goal of every single one of these. And the two key words that have been in my mind for this summer and that I want to put into you now. These first two words, intentional and permission. For us to grow this summer, we have to be intentional. We have to focus. We have to have a plan, and we're going to talk about that. But we need to give ourselves and give each other permission. We need to be able to say no to some things. We need to be able to allow ourselves to not focus on some things so that we can better focus on others. We might need to give ourselves permission to let some things go so that we can truly pick some other things up. So I'll talk about these briefly because you can read, and we're going to talk about these ongoing. But kind of our main tools for the summer is one, Sunday church gatherings. So we are going to meet every Sunday, but we are not going to meet every Sunday in this room because I don't know if you've noticed or not, sometimes during the summer this room can get hot. So you have to take my word on that. And so we're looking for some other ways in which we can still gather this summer, but kind of have a different rhythm to it. And so we have different Sunday experiences that are going to start on July 7th. And I'm so excited for every single one of these because it will be a way for us to learn, a way for us to be together and kind of experience what some of these practices look like together. And so watch the website, watch our social media, watch the weekly emails to find out more concrete details about each of those. But each of those Sunday experiences are going to be great, and I hope that you can join us for every single one of those. Next, I'm going to skip community groups for a second. I'm going to come back to that. CC Kids, we have some great activities that they're on the table up there. When you check your kids in and out, there's some out there. We get that the summer is, you might be traveling, you might be going somewhere, you might just be kind of hanging around here. But this summer is a chance for parents. Our kids are going to be around us more than normal because of the school schedule. And some of you are excited about that, and some of you are a little less excited about that. But we love our kids. And so we want to equip you as best as possible to take some of that extra time this summer to not just let them play in the yard, although playing in the yard's great. No, not just watching shows, although watching shows can be fine. But to make a regular practice as a family, focusing on and intentionally spending time with Jesus. And we have some great tools for you guys to do that, as well as some other fun get-togethers. Teens, hey teens. There's some teens back there. Hey, teens. We love all you teens. Super excited this summer. We are going to be getting together 5 Wednesdays in a row, and so check out the information on there, and I would love for you to spend some time with us with that. And then the individual practices. This is something that is totally on you, but I think that these might be some of the things that most can push you forward. Of what we talk about daily office, which is the regular time with God, Sabbath, and blessing. And as we go through all of those, none of those I don't think are, so look around the folks that are here, those that are watching online, none of those are like, oh, I had never thought of that before. Like, okay, so if I'm going to grow in Jesus, I need to spend time around Jesus. That's brilliant. I had never thought about that before. And most of us had never thought about like, okay, so I'm daily office. I'm supposed to like spend time with Jesus, praying and reading the Bible. I should take a day off just to like remember that God's in control of the world and not just me, and enjoy and delight. Like, this is not new information, but it's information that many of us are not great, if we're honest, I won't make anybody raise their hand, about doing on a regular basis. And we find ourselves getting plucked out and not remaining in him. And so that's why that community group piece, and there's a whole another sheet that talks about all kinds of purposes of community groups. One of the reasons why we come together as a large group as this is it helps us when we're around other people. But we really want, for us to grow, this is not an individual sport. I don't believe that growing in Jesus, bearing fruit, staying connected, is possible if you're trying to do it alone. And I don't think it's possible to do it if you just have other people kind of around you in general. That could be helpful to some extent, but most of us need a person or a couple people that are intentionally helping us to grow, intentionally keeping us accountable, asking us the questions of, are we doing the things we said we wanted to do, and encouraging us to do the things that we know we want to do. And so we want everybody to be in a group. But we're trying to be more careful about when we talk about what a group is, because groups can be all kinds of things. I mean, there's groups that run together, and there's groups that did a clothing exchange together yesterday. That's awesome. And there's groups that get together and do dinner together, and all of those are wonderful. And we encourage you to be a part of lots of different groups in your life. But when we talk about groups at Christ Church Albany, we're saying we want you to be in what we're calling an intentional discipleship-making relationship. That the reason why I'm getting together with you isn't just to hang out and catch up. It's not just to have fun, although that's all great. This is a group of people that are intentionally helping me to move forward. And so we're asking, if you're not in one of these, we encourage you to be a part of one. And this is a bigger discussion that we're going to keep on having. But for those of you that are in groups, we want you to start to have some discussions in those groups, especially as you go through trying to plot out the summer. We want everyone in these intentional relationships. We have a great study called Be Still. It's 5 sessions where it's teaching us how to be still, because most of us are terrible at it, and making time to regularly just have daily time every day to be still, to listen, to hear what God's trying to tell us. There's a study we want to do, but the main goal is not the study. We want everybody to be a part of one of these relationships and use that study as a tool. But in your groups, to have a discussion, is this group, as we kind of look at what an intentional relationship is supposed to be, is our group kind of checking those marks? And some of your groups very well might be, and that's awesome. And some of your groups, you might need to have some discussions about what kind of changes it needs to happen so that it can actually become one of these kind of groups. Because we need groups of people that we don't just like randomly hang out with every once in a while, and different groups where it's like, oh, I get an email about that group, and like I've gone before, and sometimes I don't go, and sometimes we go and we eat, but we really haven't. I don't know if they really know what's going on in my life. Groups are great. We've had groups for 11 years at Christ Church Albany. We love the idea of community groups. But it's easy to kind of call something a group and not really have it be hitting the mark of what we actually need to help us move forward. And so we want to do whatever we can as leaders to encourage all of us to find relationships in our life that can actually move us forward this summer. So that's our main deals. Here's a couple other pieces about that before we go on. So as we're going to have intentional and permission to focus on Jesus, a couple things that I encourage you to do as you're kind of looking through this list to make this tangible. First, I encourage you to look at your calendar. A couple of weeks ago, a friend of Ashley and I's came to service, and it was great. We hadn't seen her in probably a year and a half or so, although we would say we're close with her. We would say that like we're friends with her. And we had this conversation with her that I think we've had with her the last, I don't know, 3 or 4 times that we've seen her. We say, her name's Gina, her husband's Mike. We look at them and we're like, oh, we miss you guys so much. Like, we need to get together. Let's do lunch. And like, oh, yeah, we miss you guys too. Let's do lunch. Let's do it. Okay. And then we go about our ways. And then like months go by and we've never actually done lunch because we want to get together. We have like the desire to, but we never made that step of like actually pulling out our calendar and say, let's figure this out, okay? Next Tuesday, you available? Next Thursday? When can let's sync with our heads together, we can actually figure this out. So one of the steps I would love for you to do is to go home and take this sheet and look at your phone calendar, your wall calendar, however you do stuff, and say, if these are the tools that we think as a church will help us to be able to move forward this summer and remain in Jesus, how can you not just have a desire to do these? How can you put these on a calendar? If you're going to meet with people on a regular basis in community group, how can you put it on your calendar? If you're going to make time for being a part of these Sunday experiences, if you're going to have a weekly Sabbath, you got to put it on the calendar. And then the next thing, what's going to be difficult about that is it's going to mean you're going to have to set some boundaries. So I stole this bucket of balls this morning from a friend of mine. And so here's what it looks like for most of us during the summer. Definitely looks like for me. And so if this is your summer, this is the next 77 days. It's a finite amount of days. You have a finite amount of energy. And most of us have a list of things that we want to try to get done this summer. So let's be a little interactive to make sure we're all awake. So what are some things on your list that you want to try to accomplish this summer? I'll break the ice by giving you a couple of mine. My front deck, it's kind of messed up. I got to redo the carpet. So I would like to paint and redo my deck this summer. That's one of the things I want to do. My kids just got a flyer back from the library about summer reading. So I want to encourage my kids to do summer reading and to really like focus on reading. So that's something we want to make sure we do this summer. What are some other things that you guys want to make sure we do this summer that you want to do in your family? Yeah. Get together with friends. Yeah, that's a great goal for the summer. What else do we want to do this summer? Go to the beach. Yes. What else do you want to do this summer? Go hiking. Yeah, that's good. What else do you want to do this summer? Anyone have to work this summer? Yeah, you still got to work this summer. That's probably a couple in there. What else do you want to do this summer? Do what? Go to a water park. That sounds pretty awesome. What else do you want to do this summer? Get together with some visiting family members. That sounds pretty cool. I would like to do some barbecues. That sounds pretty fun this summer. What else do you want to do this summer? Camping? Yes. My son keeps asking me to go camping. We got to figure that out. What else do you want to do this summer? Clean a bedroom? That sounds, you said clean a bedroom? Paint a bedroom. And probably, you got to clean it before you paint it. So that sounds pretty good. Anybody want to, any couples, anybody want to do any date nights this summer? Try to fit that in. Anybody want any like special like family time that they want to do, like extra kind of experience with their kids? What else? Declutter the house. Yeah. We're doing dinner today. You're talking about all kinds of things, Mary. Mary has a chore list she wants to start doing with her kids. That sounds pretty exciting. My wife wants to get my attic cleaned out. We're supposed to build some shelves up there. What? Read magazines. That sounds pretty cool. What else do we want to do? Drive-in? You go to the drive-in. That sounds pretty cool. What else do we want to do this summer? Fix the fence. Yes. Yeah, you've been like on a tear getting everything down in your house. Yeah. You guys get the point. We could all easily figure out this whole list of things. I mean, again, we didn't even talk about like the normal stuff of life, right? I mean, you got to grocery shop at some point. You're hoping to cook some meals, and like the amount of things in our life is more than we actually have room for. And so, if we want to intentionally focus on the things that will help us move forward, we're going to have to set some boundaries, and we're going to have to intentionally leave some things on the ground. I'll talk about that more in a second. Then last thing for this slide is it has to be a habit. And so actually everything on this list. The key, as I have learned about flowers, we've kind of made this mistake before. I said we're always really good at the first part of gardening, where we plant everything and everything looks pretty good. And then the summer goes on, and we'll travel and we'll go away, and we've come back and our plants are just dead because turns out you have to water them all summer long. Who knew? And you have to take care of them all summer long and weed them all summer long. And just doing it all in one giant chunk. And so if I could somehow do the math and figure out, here's how much this flower needs of water for the whole summer. And so summer's going to be busy. And so I'm going to give it all the water it needs for the whole summer just in May. That's not going to work well. And each of these isolated could be good. You do a daily office. You do a Sabbath. You come to one of the teen nights. You do one of these things with your family. It can be helpful. But where these start to really pick up traction is when they become a habit in our life, and it's over and over and over again. Next couple pieces, and these are a lot about kind of boundaries. So if you're going to kind of pre-decide what you're going to do, there needs to be it can be some FOMO sometimes, because especially I think families, that's the world I live in. If you don't have family, I'm sure there's other ones. But it's all this pressure, especially with kids of man, I got to get them in summer reading, and I should probably have them in a sport, and I got to make sure they're in a camp, and I got to make sure, and there's all this stuff that I feel this pressure that I got to do, and I'm trying to fit it all in, and it can drive yourself crazy. And so you have to be okay. So FOMO stands for fear of missing out. So part of, did I get that wrong? Is it not? Okay. It happens sometimes. For us to move forward and really focus on things, we might be you know what? Summer reading's great. If I don't get them enrolled in that and they miss some books, but it allows us to be in part of some of these things. If I don't get all the extra work assignments that I could get done this summer, it's choosing. I'll talk about it in a second. Next one is kind of the idea of countercultural. If you decide to focus on these instead of kind of our normal culture is over busy, and this summer we're going to focus on being still. Our normal culture is just adding, and we want to focus on boundaries. Our normal world does not sleep enough. We don't Sabbath enough. Our normal culture is not hearing what God wants to say. Most people are not great about loving other people. Most people do not have deep relationships. And so if we want to have different fruit in our lives than what we have seen in our lives before and what we see in everybody else, then we're going to have to choose to live counterculture, which is always the way of Jesus. And then the last one is a similar idea, but it's choosing to cheat. So there's a book by Andy Stanley. I encourage you to check it out. It's called Choosing to Cheat. But what he says is that all of us end up cheating. And what normally happens is we have all this stuff going on. And so because we're extra focused on work, and we're extra focused on all these extra kids' activities, and we're extra focused on getting these house projects, what ends up normally kind of hitting the ground is it's daily office, it's sleep, it's Sabbath, it's date nights, it's easy. And he says all of us cheat, and most of us just end up cheating unintentionally. And so what he encourages you to do in the book is to choose to cheat intentionally. To say, we're taking a Sabbath. I'm going to wake up in the morning. I'm going to spend time with God. I am going to put some of these events on my calendar. And that means some other stuff is going to hit the ground, and that's going to be hard because it's countercultural. I have some fear of missing out on those other things. But I'm going to choose to focus on the things that most matter in my life. And what I believe is that if we, as a group of people, are to actually take those steps. If we take the time this summer to intentionally focus on remaining in Jesus and loving other people, then we can take some steps forward, and we will find that when September 8th comes around, we will have grown. So here's how I want to end. Dave, you can go and come on up and add some. Or I see 10. 10, come on up and give me some music here. As I want to spend a little bit of time